It was a busy 5 days, and we put a lot of miles on the wheels of our minivan during that time. Now, 20 minutes after returning home, I was sitting on the veranda in my favorite old chair with a glass of delicious dark nectar porter, thinking about how our twins were spending their first days, fluttering free from parental care for the first time. Miranda and I have just completed a journey that has turned our good old family home into an empty nest. The same journey that thousands of other parents have made before us, or at the same time as us, with their own offspring over the past few days. And I could guarantee that none of the other thousands of parent couples would feel as great as I did at that moment. Since Luke attended Georgia Tech, Atlanta became the first destination on our journey. We were also able to leave our rental car there, which meant we no longer had to change each other's driving. Our daughter Kelly was flown to Gainesville to be a Gator the next day, while we and her parents headed a few miles further east to Daytona Beach to take advantage of a few days of sunbathing and beach time. The next 3 days were filled with more sex than we had ever had before in our entire marriage. Miranda was simply insatiable. Having children early, when we were both just over 18, meant that we were now only 36, and our energy reserves and libido levels were still high. On the way home, we made a short stop at a deserted truck stop, where Miri did her best to prove to me that she forgot to put on her underwear for a reason. Now, while I was lounging in a chair, indulging in my pleasant memories, Miranda went upstairs to take a shower and get cleaned up. I was a little surprised when I heard the hairdryer turn on, which usually only happens when she is getting ready for work or getting ready to go out somewhere in the town. A few minutes after the whine of the hairdryer stopped, I heard Miranda's steps and the clicking of the heels of her shoes already in the kitchen, another unusual sound for my ear, since she usually walked around the house in rubber-soled slippers or simply barefoot. Before I could continue my lazy reflections on these incomprehensible phenomena, she called out to me, "Alan, honey, could you come and sit with me for a minute? I need to chat with you a little. It won't be long." Emerging from my dreams and from my chair and carrying my empty glass in my hand, I cheerfully responded, "I'm on my way, darling." Walking into the kitchen, I was amazed to see my wife sitting at the table, dressed in a fresh blouse and clean jeans, looking as great as ever. She poured me a freshly brewed mug of coffee and placed it in front of where she was sitting. Miranda seemed focused and a little tense, and I was puzzled, not understanding what her smart look meant, so I slowly sat down on the empty chair that she obviously wanted me to sit on. "What's going on, Miri?" I asked warmly, taking possession of the cup and taking a sip of the strong, hot drink. "I'm leaving you, Alan," she announced simply and casually in a calm voice, picking up a large envelope made of thick paper. "I have divorce papers here for you to review and sign." She still said something, but I was literally numb in shock, my head was noisy, and I could not utter a word. A deafening blow that came from out of nowhere. I had never practiced boxing, but in those seconds I felt like how, in my opinion, a boxer floats after missing a powerful uppercut and getting into a heavy knockdown. Pushing the envelope with documents onto my edge of the table, Miri continued to hammer monotonous phrases, one by one, like piles, into my brain, completely oblivious to the tetanus that had struck me. "All conditions for divorce are written in these papers. I don't expect anything from you. With all my things left in this house, you can do whatever you want. All our savings have been divided and bills paid as of today, and I have canceled all joint credit cards. I notified everyone who needed to know about the change of my residential address. You can find out all other details from your own lawyer. If you need anything from me, contact me only through my lawyer." Taking a breath, Miranda continued her speech in the same dispassionate, businesslike voice. "I also made sure to get a restraining order because I don't want to have any more contact with you after I leave. You will also find it in this envelope. In addition, I changed my phone number and email address, and all my previous accounts are now closed. She didn't expect me to answer anything, and I couldn't utter a word. I just sat there like an idol and stared stupidly at her. On the table in front of me, an almost untouched cup of coffee exuded a light, disappearing steam and was slowly cooling. "Please," she tapped her well-groomed, varnished nail on the tabletop in warning, "don't try to create any problems with the children by trying to extract any information from them, since they are aware of what is happening and will not help you." The same thing applies to my parents. Having stopped looking over me indifferently or examining her sleek hands, Miranda finally focused her gaze on me, coldly looking straight into my eyes. "I know, Alan, that you're going to ask about this, so I'd better say it myself. I have been in a relationship with Dan for the past 13 years, and now I hope to turn my work husband into my real, full-time husband. I love—" She paused for a moment and corrected herself. "Loved you, Alan. I just love Dan more. He endured and waited long enough to earn the right to be with me. Well, today I'm breaking up with you, and now I will completely belong to him, alone. That's all. Goodbye, Alan." Miranda finished, stood up, and left the table, heading towards the exit. Only when she picked up the bag with things that was standing at the threshold and had already opened the front door, I finally found the gift of speech, and in a strange voice was able to croak out only one word. "Why?" Still showing no emotion, she froze for a moment, turned her head, looked me straight in the eyes, and said only two words: "Sandy Thompson." With these words, she stepped over the threshold, slamming the door behind her, and all I heard in the inky silence was only the fractional click of her shoes, the muffled knock of the car door, and the sound of a roaring engine, gradually moving away and disappearing after a minute. That was the last time I saw or spoke to Miranda for the next 16 months. Daddy at work was Dan Roberts, the man I've considered my oldest and best friend for the past 18 years. Miri and Dan's wife, Lisa, became close friends during their pregnancy. Soulmates, you might say, since they were both close in age. Lisa was 22, and Miri was just over 18. Moreover, Cassie, the daughter of Dan and Lisa, was born the day after our twins, which of course served as a clear sign of fate for both wives. This initial friendship grew into such closeness that they were both inseparable, which naturally meant that we husbands were also together. The closeness of the two families soon became almost like a family unit within one large and friendly family, since we visited each other every weekend, and it was very convenient to live just 2 blocks from each other. Until our oops moment that brought the twins into this world, both Miranda and I were in college. Miri always wanted to study business or business management, while I majored in mathematics while earning a partial scholarship to the college baseball team. True, at that time I had not yet decided which path to choose in later life. Everything changed when Miri told me she was pregnant and I had to give up all my hopes and dreams to get a job and support our family. Our parents were great to both of us, so the wedding was booked and organized by them within 2 months. I was late and the only child of my parents. When I was born, they were already approaching 40 years of age, and they bitterly thought that they were destined to remain childless. Therefore, thanking heaven for such great joy that finally fell upon them, they always gave me all the love and support that a long-awaited child could have. Miri had a brother, Tom, 10 years older than her, which meant that she didn't really have a particularly close family relationship with him. Tom left for college before she was 8, and other than a couple of fleeting visits, he never really returned to the family. Unfortunately, he died in a bizarre car accident just a year after graduating from college. This forced Miranda's parents to devote as much attention to their only daughter as my mother and father devoted to me. As a wedding gift, my parents ceremoniously presented me with the deeds to our old family home, as they themselves were moving further south, planning to retire in the next few years. I found a job selling policies at a local insurance company, quickly getting used to the business and feeling like a fish in water. The salary for a new agent was, of course, quite low, but the good commissions from successful deals could almost double my income compared to my initial salary. It just meant that you had to work a lot, persistently, and late into the night. usually 12 hours a day, and sometimes including weekends. In the months before giving birth, Miri took a part-time job as a secretary in one of the offices, with the same intention of getting a degree, but now she spent most of her time studying part-time, online. It was during this period of time that the support of her parents became truly invaluable. When the twins were born, they became our lifesaver in caring for the babies and used any excuse to visit them and play with their grandchildren. The fatal incident with Sandy Thompson occurred 3 years later. I was successful in my business, and my company nominated me for Salesperson of the Year for the North Carolina region. Our small company, which that year also became one of the market leaders and was later purchased by a national corporation, believed in my success. In addition to the $2,500 bonus, I was given an all-expenses-paid trip for 3 nights to Washington, D.C., where we were headquartered. The voyage to the capital also included a gala ceremony with dinner on the first evening, at which the bestseller of the year was to be chosen, and then 2 more days that remained at our complete disposal. For Miri and I, this would be the first time we left our city somewhere together, without the twins, and we were looking forward to it with joyful anticipation. But 2 days before departure, everything went wrong. First, Luke was diagnosed with a whooping cough, and the next day, Kelly also fell ill. Unfortunately, my presence at the ceremony was mandatory, so Miri kissed me goodbye on Friday morning with sadness in her eyes and made me promise that I would try to enjoy the next few days. Arriving about an hour before the gala started, I had time to check in and let them know that I was arriving at the ceremony without my +1 accompanying me. After showering, shaving, and putting on my rented tuxedo, I walked down into the great room and found my seat at the table, finding myself seated next to Sandy Thompson, who had arrived from our office in Little Rock. While most of the people at the dinner were in their 30s or older, Sandy was only a year older than me. I was 21 at the time, and this was her first full year with the company. Before this big event, I had only had a few beers in my life, and this place had a free open bar. During the entire dinner, as far as I remember, I only drank a couple of glasses of wine. Then, when the awards began to be announced, I was absolutely shocked to hear that I was the one who was loudly proclaimed Salesperson of the Year. Wow. Stunned, I made my way onto the stage, where I was presented with a trophy cup and a check for $10,000 to thunderous applause, and when I returned to my desk, I was kindly sent a bottle of champagne from our bosses. To be honest, the rest of the night passed in a bit of a blur until I woke up at 5 a.m. the next morning, lying in bed next to the deliciously naked Sandy Thompson. Scared to death, with ringing in my ears and a severe hangover, I rushed to my room on unruly legs, frantically packed my things, and was on my way home within 20 minutes. Miri, of course, was immensely surprised to see me 4.5 hours later when I rushed home. And, as you would expect, she was not very happy 10 minutes later when I told her that I got drunk at a gala dinner and found myself the next morning in another girl's bed. Angry, she abruptly interrupted me, refusing to listen to my explanations and excuses. The only thing she asked me was what the girl's name was, and before I could say anything else, she abruptly told me that she was going to her parents for a couple of days. Quickly packing a small bag, she, without saying a word, grabbed the car keys, ran out the door, and disappeared, leaving the children with me. For 3 days, Miranda did not answer my calls, apparently not even wanting to hear my voice. I went to work on Tuesday after dropping off the kids at the daycare we used, and when I returned in the evening, she was already home, carefully pretending that nothing had happened between us. When I tried to talk to her, she immediately interrupted me and harshly said that if I ever mentioned this again, she would immediately take the children, leave, and never return. When we went to bed that night, she fucked me. In bed between us, there was no previous intimacy and sensual love, only 90 minutes of hard mechanical sex. After that night, it took many more months for the feeling of intimacy in sex to return, but eventually it did, and, as per her request, we never spoke about the incident again. The following year, Miri graduated, received her business degree, and wanted to get a job that would use her knowledge. Our relationship with Dan and Lisa blossomed to the point where we spent every weekend together, unless Dan's work or mine interfered. Even so, it didn't stop our wives from meeting and spending time together, although it became a little more difficult for us as Lisa and Dan moved 15 miles away to be closer to Dan's work. Ironically, or simply by coincidence, Miri's parents soon moved to the same area to rent a larger apartment that would provide more space for their grandchildren. In addition, they also began looking after Robert's daughter, Cassie, giving Dan and Lisa a little more freedom. Dan's company grew quickly, and one day they needed an office manager, and he himself needed a personal assistant. This position seemed to be a perfect fit for Miri, and after interviewing with managers, my wife got the job and loved it. Miranda grew up with the company and was always close to Dan, hence the humorous name Dan's work wife. This situation continued for 7 years, and then Lisa suddenly died from a brain aneurysm. In fact, this terrible blow to her happened on the day when she was visiting me, as usually happened when Dan and Miri had to go on business trips together. This tragedy was devastating for all of us, but it obviously hit Dan especially. He couldn't handle the shock himself, and he certainly couldn't look after his 11-year-old daughter properly on his own. So the solution was to have Miranda come over to the Roberts' house for a couple of hours after work, 3 times a week, to make sure everything in their house was clean and tidy, and to prepare dinners that could be quickly reheated. At least that's how Miri presented the situation to me. 16 months later, I was just leaving the garage with the last box of things to load into my minivan when I paused for a second as I saw Miri's car pull into the driveway of the house. It was the first time she had returned from that memorable conversation in the kitchen during which she had so coldly thrown the divorce petition at me. So at this point, of course, she was the last person I expected to see today. When she got out of the car, I greeted her. "Miranda, aren't you violating the restraining order by being here?" I asked in an even and neutral tone. "The ban ceased to apply on the day we divorced." She waved it off, playing with her keyring. "How are you doing?" I shrugged. "Things are as white as soot. I live in the present and dream of a bright future. Would you like some coffee?" I threw over my shoulder, already returning to the house. "That would be great," she replied, following me. By this time, there was nothing left in the house except a few boxes and a lonely dining table in the kitchen. All household appliances and one of the bedroom sets were left to the new owners. The sale of the rest of the furniture and other household items among neighbors and acquaintances, carried out over the past couple of days, was very successful. What was left over will soon be sent to the landfill. The son of one of my former work colleagues promised to do this for me the day before I handed over the keys to the new residence. His wife and her friend also volunteered to help me with the final cleaning and organizing of the rooms of the house, although I tried unsuccessfully to refuse. A lonely greeting card lay lonely on the mantelpiece in the living room. Since I turned 38 a couple of days ago, my colleagues at the office gathered to send it to me, with warm congratulations from all of them, as well as another card, wishing great luck in the new place, which I had already packed with my luggage. The company I worked for over 19 years has always been very kind to me, and it was with sadness and great regret that I was leaving behind some good friends, but it had to be done. There was nothing keeping me here anymore. Having made coffee and each taking a mug of hot drink, we sat down in the same places where we were face-to-face 16 months ago. "So, why do I suddenly have the pleasure of being in your company on this beautiful day?" Having taken a sip, I asked with detached curiosity, because I could not understand what prompted Miri to return here again after she abruptly and mercilessly cut off all the loose ends between us. "Don't you guess?" She snorted with visible displeasure. "The children received letters from you saying that you were moving somewhere. I don't understand why you didn't just call them and tell them about it. Why did you need to notify them by registered mail? In fact, I did just that because it was the only way to be sure that they would know that I was moving. Otherwise, of course they would have unleashed all the dogs on me, accusing me of disappearing in English. Actually, I was just calling them... Oh, wait a minute, I chuckled. Small correction. I called Kelly because I can't call Luke. What are you talking about? Why can't you call Luke? Miri asked, puzzled. I don't have his number, I sighed. Listen, the fact is that the children don't want to keep in touch with me, I explained, seeing from her ironically raised eyebrows that she didn't believe my words at all. Well, I'm going to have to show my ex-wife how our kids really feel about me. My phone was on the table in front of me, so I unlocked it and dialed Kelly's number, putting it on speaker. The caller beeped 10 long times before going to voicemail. I pressed end and looked at Miri. I couldn't you call her? Would you be so kind? Kelly must just be busy, she answered me as if making excuses, but still took out her mobile phone and dialed our daughter's number, also putting the phone on speakerphone. It is noteworthy that her call was answered almost immediately after the second ring. Hello, Mom. How are you? Kelly's cheerful voice rang out. I'm fine, honey. What are you doing now? Well, right now we're chilling with Cassie. We're going to a party later, so at this moment we're just lying around and saving energy, my daughter answered with a giggle and a drawn-out laziness. Have you heard any news from your father? Miri asked, looking at me and arching her eyebrow meaningfully. Yes, I talked to him last night. He said he talked to you and promised he'd pick up Cassie and me today. Yeah, in about 10 minutes. I think he's going to grab Luke later too, before we all go to the party. Kelly chirped. I felt my insides clench painfully as I heard my daughter call Dad Daddy. Miri could always read me like an open book, so she saw how much that little thoughtless comment from Kelly hurt me. Clenching my fists, I simply leaned back in my chair and stared blankly at the ceiling. You mean Dan? Miri asked incredulously, as if not believing what she had just heard. Well, yes, Mom, who else? Kelly continued to giggle. By the way, he really likes it when I call him Dad, and in any case, you know that he will still become my father in 3 weeks, she reminded her mother. In 3 weeks, my ex-wife was supposed to get married again. Believe it or not, they even sent me an invitation to their celebration. Yeah, right now, as if I was really going to show up there. Kelly Ann, I'm asking you, when was the last time you talked to your real father? Miri asked impatiently, raising her voice slightly, in which stern notes appeared. Oh, Mom. Well, I don't remember. Maybe a few weeks ago. Sensing something wrong in her mother's voice, Kelly's amused tone immediately disappeared. I opened and showed her my call log for Kelly's number, and Miri, glancing at the screen, could see my numerous but unsuccessful attempts to reach my daughter. To be honest, none of my children have called me since Miri left, not a single call in almost a year and a half. That's funny to hear because I'm sitting next to him right now, and I saw with my own eyes how he tried to call you just a minute before I did. What's going on, Kelly? Miri asked in an even more stern voice. Oh, well, Mom, came our daughter's confused bleating from the speaker. I just want to remind you that you only have one father, and it's not Dan. We'll talk seriously about this later, young lady, the mother promised harshly, ending the conversation and irritably poking the end call button. Miranda was clearly upset as she turned off the call and pushed the phone away from her. So why don't you have Luke's number? She returned to the question again. FYI, Dan made sure the boy had a new phone and memorized his number within hours of his old phone being stolen. If only I knew. I shrugged. Listen, don't be too strict with the children. Apparently, such was their love and affection for me that after a little over a year they found me completely unnecessary. Smiling darkly, I intertwined my fingers and squeezed them tightly. You heard your daughter. She is happy that she will now have a new father. You know that old saying, out of sight, out of mind? Well, apparently, for Kelly, I am already an empty place. I pointed to my long list of calls on my phone. As you can see, I no longer have anything to do with the children. And, as far as I know, in 3 weeks, I will be officially replaced by the real dad. This comment, as I saw it, really hurt her, but it was the sad truth. I think that since you left, I've talked to both of them, combined, for a total of no more than an hour. Although I tried to stay in touch, God, I really tried. Remembering one of these typical moments, I smiled bitterly. The time I was able to get tickets to the Braves game on opening day of the season, I was so pleased and happy. But when I called Luke with the news, he said he was too busy to have fun. I sighed and looked up at Miri's frozen figure opposite me. And later I found out that he and Dan and a couple of other guys went to that very game, buying tickets at the last minute. Well, if that's what they want to do, I can't force them to do otherwise. We were silent for a few moments, lost in our thoughts, before Miri changed the subject with a quiet cough. So you're moving out of here to be closer to your parents? Not really. I have to leave so I can look after my mother. Now she needs constant care and attention. Oh my God! Did something happen to her? How does your father deal with this? You never told me anything that she had any problems, she exclaimed, while her eyes sparkled with tears. Well, at least Miri really loved my parents. Mom has a late stage of Alzheimer's disease. This is very bad because she doesn't remember anything at all 90% of the time. As for Dad, we buried him a little over 3 weeks ago. The hospital said he had a heart attack, although personally I think his heart was broken, and Dad left because he was suffering too much from disappointment and pain. Oh no! My ex-wife burst into tears, and through her sobs asked, How do you know it was a broken heart and why didn't you call us? Of course I called, I objected tiredly. And to tell you the truth, that was the last time I talked to Kelly. Yeah, it was the day after Thanksgiving. That's when I found out that Luke had a new number. And our conversation with Kelly lasted no more than a minute. Without even trying to listen to what I wanted to tell her, she hastily blurted out that she was incredibly busy and would call me back soon.